Hey there, it's Pharr here at mediumshipwithmal.com. Today's video is going to be really different than any other one that I've made so far. Here is my intention to transparently share with you my dark night of the soul that I had from June to September of this last year, 2023. That was, in some ways, the worst 4 months of my life. Why? I share without the intention of giving advice, a diagnosis, or to compare my experience with anyone else's, but so that perhaps my story helps you to feel that you're not alone in your struggles, especially other mediums who may experience dark nights and notice that your gifts suffer during these times. And also because it's great to see high quality readings and content videos that are helpful. But don't you also want to know that someone you follow is a real person with human faults who doesn't get it right all the time and who sometimes really, really struggles? And also because I really believe that societally we do a shitty job of being supportive and open concerning mental health. First, what is a dark night of the soul? For me, it is painfully being held somewhere, a chapter or a season of life, until I am shaped and molded into the next version of self. This always results for me in a significant shift in my perspective. I also always eventually recognize a larger purpose for my dark night. To share about my dark night, I've broken my story into 5 stages because as a natural teacher, I couldn't stand not to. And also because I'm hoping that while it helped me process what I went through better, perhaps for a dark night of the soul for you, you'll be able to use these stages as well to know that you're moving forward through your dark night. What has always preceded my dark night are 3 stages. And so for me, my story begins at stage 1, change. For most of us, change means loss, whether it's death or just the ending of something, and therefore it also equals new beginnings. And most importantly, change can sometimes signify identity changes. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, Rob and I lived in New York City. My sister was in Montana, so we decided to head to Montana for the summer because New York City was a really hard place to be without a lot of ability to get outside in nature or even leave our apartment. We intended to stay 3 months. We never got on our return flight on September 7th. We ended up staying in Montana for 5 months. Then we bought the first car we had ever owned together, drove to Colorado, sold our apartment from Colorado, bought a house in Colorado. I retired my business of 8 years and we had a child. Every identity that I had held for the majority of my life changed in a very short period of time. New Yorker to Coloradan, non-parent to parent, athlete to postpartum recovery, career woman and entrepreneur to stay-at-home mom. Over the next 1 to 2 years, I did spend quite a bit of time mourning the losses of those identities. Now, stages 2 and 3 could be switched, and in all my previous dark nights, they actually have come in a different order than what I'm going to share. But for the sake of this story, I'll start with stage 2 being the whispers of spirit. This is the part of the story where I was very new to my new identities, but I really started hearing what I call the whispers of spirit. Ideas and thoughts that feel really significant that just seem to come to mind often. After becoming a mother, I started to feel, first of all, that I had a heightened awareness of the voices that feel just like inner thoughts that I operated from my entire life, but they were louder now. One of the most significant whispers from spirit that I heard was that it was time for me to start letting go of worry. Worry has been a significant part of my life. It is triggered by certain circumstances for me, And I was often and clearly hearing that it was time for me to start putting worry aside. My husband had even named my worry doomsday syndrome. If something went slightly wrong, I would think about the worst case scenario and allow it to cause me worry and sometimes anxiety. While I don't consider this part of the story my dark night, during the years of 2020 and 2021, especially, this is the point in my life where I had the least faith that I've ever had in humanity. And I found that incredibly devastating. And I had moments of hopelessness. I got a very clear whisper from Spirit that it was my responsibility to restore my faith in humanity. And I heard this whisper constantly. Just before my daughter had been born in 2021, I had timed the retirement of my old business, and I heard in my mind that I would know exactly what I was to do within 2 years of her birth. This was the third thing that was a very loud and a very clear whisper of Spirit. Stage 3 is a new beginning. Now, like I shared in my previous dark nights, I go from change to new beginning and then hearing the whispers of Spirit. But this time I went change, whispers of Spirit, and then new beginning. I was held for a long time in stage 2 before the new beginning appeared to me. It wasn't until the end of 2022 that these whispers I had been hearing started to manifest and make me wonder if I was hearing more than just ideas of my own in my mind. You can watch the story of how I realized I'm a medium up here, but it got to the point that I asked someone who was a stranger to come to my home and sit down so that I could see if I had any skills as a medium. The rest was history. And for any of you who have been following me, you will now realize that my journey as a medium is quite young. I came in with what felt like instant abilities, and they have grown strongly and very quickly. For me, it was absolutely clear that this is my lifelong work and that I'm never turning back. And the feeling of love and heightened connection with other people that came from that put me on an absolute high. And so I also call this stage the honeymoon period, because with new beginnings, we get in that honeymoon period where the newness is a novelty. I happened to be drinking lots of caffeine during this time. And while I was keeping up with all of my other life responsibilities, especially parenting, every thought, every breath, every day was mediumship. And for those who know me well, that would be absolutely no surprise. My mother-in-law said to me once, "You just don't do anything halfway, do you?" No, I don't. Bam, stage 4 of my story. This is when my dark night of the soul began. What I can see so clearly now is that dark nights of the soul play an incredible role in our lives. It's about preparation and, for me, emotional excavation that prepares me for the next season of my life. It's about shedding old ways of being that were attached to those old identities as you come into your new. And it is so painful and scary. And for me, it just happened in a moment. It came crashing in. This last June 14th was the exact day that I remember what felt like moments of dizziness happening for me throughout the day. Then the crippling panic attacks started. It's always terrifying when you don't know why a moment feels like absolute life or death. It's impossible to pinpoint why your nervous system is acting up to a level that you can't be functional anymore. I also had a lot of moments of feeling like I was in the twilight zone, stuck somewhere inside my body, looking out, but not really present. I figured out from research and therapy that this is known as depersonalization, and it is a symptom of heavy, heavy anxiety. Next, my eyes became incredibly sensitive. I couldn't leave the house without wearing sunglasses everywhere I went. I couldn't use my computer without blue light glasses, which I am still very careful about even when I do readings. Sometimes I had to walk around the house with sunglasses on, and a practitioner I worked with let me know that that was a sign of deep levels of stress. I was in and out of urgent care 3 times in 1 week. I ended up in the ER I had every test done to my body. I ended up in a neurologist office. I got a CAT scan because my symptoms were so unrelenting and intense. And what I couldn't understand for months until just probably 6 weeks ago was, why is this happening? The last year and a half has probably been the happiest time in my entire life. And not just because of mediumship, but because of just about every aspect of life. I always looked at myself as a self aware person. So, why didn't I see this coming? It turns out there were a lot of reasons. I hadn't gotten any emotional support whatsoever, except for a few conversations with some friends and family about integrating any of those identity changes that had practically happened overnight. I hadn't gotten any emotional support in terms of my devastation that I felt about the deep division that's been going on in our country and in our world. I also know myself as somebody who gets excited and passionate and really goes for things, but I hadn't made much time to come down off the high from my mediumship honeymoon. Lots of caffeine, lots of reading, lots of YouTube videos being pushed out, and without yet having found the clarity about what this looks like when it's sustainable. I had also just recently experienced a relationship upheaval with one of the most important people in my life that I did not see coming, but that was clearly on Spirit's to do list for me. It took a lot of months to reflect on the fact that my system had these things to process. And suddenly, my biggest download was remembering how much work I had done as an individual to be molded and shaped into the mother that would welcome my daughter into the world. The download was so clear that this dark night, remember, I always find that overall greater purpose. While it served many purposes for me as an individual and as a mother of one, that it came to primarily shape and mold me into the person who can handle being a mother of three and who has the emotional maturity to play all the roles that I play in my life with all of the people who are in my life. If you haven't seen my 2-part YouTube series about my future prediction, check it out here and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You see, I can feel the timeline that I planned before I came here for my next unborn children. It's coming up, and that I am not yet, but very quickly becoming the version of myself who can say, I'm ready. And perhaps if I'd done more of what I'm doing now, then the 4 months of unrelenting physical symptoms and anxiety and panic that felt extremely life threatening and unsustainable, perhaps it wouldn't have gotten quite so bad. So I did a couple things. I got a therapist and I talked to her every single week. I decided to go on anti-anxiety medication for a period. There have been 3 other times in my life from 25 and earlier that I did this and it worked splendidly. And this time, I think it came close to saving my life. I stopped drinking caffeine. I decided my cap for how many readings I will give in a week. I created more of a community in my relatively new home in Colorado. In fact, this is a silly thing to say, but I literally have never had so many dear friends that I could call up about anything and everything. I did start going at a slightly slower pace, but anybody who knows me well knows that a slower pace in life just isn't who I am, and that as long as I have the rest in R&R, there's nothing wrong with that. There's so much more, so many other details of how I take great care of myself and always have. But sometimes dark nights come even when you are taking great care of yourself in many ways. But it's not enough to have you escape a lesson that Spirit knows is more important than your comfort. The last stage, evolution. We're always evolving, so I would never say that I've arrived in any kind of finite way. But my massive perspective shifts, I always shared that they come, are the following. I can be a mother of 3 and be happy, and I'm very nearly ready. I do have such faith in humanity, even at a time like this where division and apathy are such a danger. Therapy isn't talked about nearly enough, and it's not just for dark nights. To be a happy human and to also be an accurate and effective medium and shed bias in your readings to your utmost ability, you have to face yourself and do personal work on a regular basis, just like you would take good care of yourself with healthy meals or go to the gym if that's your thing. I wanted to share transparently as well as a medium for all those other spiritual workers out there that during this past summer when I was really struggling with my mental health, I had to reschedule two of my readings. I couldn't get a good blend. I couldn't anchor the links. I was giving spotty evidence, and I could tell two of my sitters were extremely disappointed. One reading I stopped 10 minutes in, the other one I did the entire reading and knew it just wasn't worth what they had paid for. I just recently gave those readings on the same day, and wow, they were two of the highest quality readings that I've ever given. I also let both of my sitters know why I felt it was too difficult for me to read before. And one of them said to me, "I'm so glad you told me that your mental health was in a very dangerous place, because I thought the reason I didn't get a reading that went well was my fault." And while sitters can block energy, that was not the case in this instance. It was on me. So I share a lot of this for transparency's sake, but also for sitters out there and for mediums who, when you go through a dark night or a challenging time and you worry that you're going to lose your gifts forever, that you won't. My sincere and heartfelt hope is that if any part of this resonates with you, that you see yourself somewhere in my story in a way that is validating and affirming, that provides relief and perhaps a feeling of normalcy for yourself. And for all of you out there who are mediums, I once had a tutor who said, there will be times in your mediumship where you will be held still on your development journey. And it's almost always to give you space and time to focus on parts of your life that need your attention. Here's to our human journey and the precious soul growth that comes from a dark night when we're willing to go through it.